good to be with you here this morning. Just before I start, on the actual message, quite a few people asked me during the week, what are your thoughts on what's happening in the US? And then Paul went out and picked up takeaways for our family and ran into someone from the church. And they're like, I want to hop inside Carolyn's head and see what she's thinking. I'm like, no, don't do that, because most of it's nonsense. But I thought, I've been asked to share an opinion. I'm not short of opinions. So anyway, I did note some of this in the newsletter, but I do think this is an interesting cultural moment, and it's interesting because at the moment it is pretty contained in the US, but there are signs of it spreading. I don't know if you saw in the UK, there was a huge turnout and protest of extreme right people. I was going to say activists, I don't think they are. And so there is this kind of movement. And I think what we see in the States is the most extreme in Western culture, the most extreme of liberal way of thinking you would find in the US, and then the most extreme en masse of conservative. You do find pockets like Gloriavale, you'll find them everywhere, but in the West, kind of to have, probably a good quarter of the population with quite extreme conservative views. And that is going to be problematic. Then add into that, an enduring obsession with guns. It is volatile, and I think that is one protective factor we have in other countries. We have more restrictions on who has access to guns. I don't know if any of you have watched the musical Hamilton. I know some of you have seen it live, lucky you. But Hamilton dies from gunfire from his political opponent, right in the foundation of the modern nation state of the US is gun violence, and that is part of their culture that they cling to and that a lot of people are really proud of. And I think when I reflect on it, I actually think that's more of a problem than this political division that we see, because when you read a lot about this young guy, the perpetrator, who pulled the trigger, he wasn't particularly political. He didn't like the guy he shot, obviously. You don't go shooting people you love. But he wasn't, this person known for his extreme views, for his political agitation, for joining protests. There was sort of none of that. But what you do see is when you read what he had written or had engraved on the bullets, they're all memes and jokes from gaming culture. And he loved gaming, and he loved first-person shooter gaming. And in those games, when you shoot someone, you'll just drop them a wee snarky message. Ha ha ha, I've just killed you. And the things that were on his bullet casings were those. They're from gaming culture, just little memes that you pop in. Ha ha ha, I shot you. And I actually think that's more worrying in that culture. That actually this bizarre kind of disregard for human life, that everything's a joke, that nothing's meaningful. And I think of several years ago, there was an image that came out, and it was an American who had gone to Africa and paid to go game shooting and paid so that he could kill a lion. And he did. He shot a lion and he posted photos of himself with a lion all over his social media. And I think there's that desire, look at me, the ultimate alpha male, I can take out the king predator. And why did he do that? I think just to sort of prove a point, I can. I hold a gun, I can kill things, I can take them out. And I wonder if this young guy, it was a little bit of this. Look at me, if I take out that lion over there that people look at and notice and has got a bit of a following, then I'm the alpha male. I'm the king predator at that point. I mean, I don't know what's inside his head, but I think it is confusing and bewildering when you look at it and you looked at who they were expecting the shooter to be. And then you just find a very clever boy who's dropped out of college, who probably has to find a way to prove himself to the world. It is concerning. I think more concerning really is this gun culture, the way we turn killing into fun and make jokes about it. It's unusual, but there is still this, behind that political division that's happening, that is coming. We see it in New Zealand, the spread of division, this extreme points of view. There are things to watch for and to pray about, I think. I think the thing that we can do is to love people in the way that Jesus did. and to constantly remind people that every person is made in the image of God. So that's some thinking on that. I also like true crime, so I was very interested in trying to trace who this person was as they were chasing him. I had Googled what was on his T-shirt. I'd done research. So that's why you probably didn't want to hop into my mind at that point, because you're like, what is she doing? Anyway, we are continuing through the book of Luke, and today we come to a very, very famous passage, and I'm going to take a slightly different lean on this. During the week, Jeff asked me, what are you going to be talking about? And I said, I'm going to go a bit left-wing on this passage, and I started chatting away. And then he was listening to me, and he's like, I think you actually mean left field, Carolyn. Oh, yeah, I do. So I'm going to go a bit left field in my interpretation of this passage. It's not political at all, particularly. So there we go. This is from Luke. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach, and this made the Pharisees and the teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. So Jesus told them this story. If a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go to search for the one that is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he will joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. And when he arrives, he will call together his friends and neighbours, saying, "Rejoice with me, because I found my lost sheep." In the same way, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. Or suppose a woman has 10 silver coins and loses one. Won't she light a lamp and carefully sweep? Or just sweep the entire house and search carefully until she finds it. And when she finds it, she will call in her friends and neighbours and say, "Rejoice with me, because I have found my lost coin." And in the same way, there is joy in the presence of God's angels when one sinner repents. This, I think, is such a beautiful, enduring image, and today I want to focus on the whole sheep and shepherd thing. But recognise that farming in Jesus' day, shepherding in Jesus' day, significantly different from anything we have witnessed. We don't have huge flocks, but shepherds would have to lead their flock every day out to try and find food for it to eat, water for it to drink. There isn't lush, endless, rolling fields, high country of food for the sheep. They have to go and hunt for it. So you're out all day under the beating sun looking after your sheep. And the key job here, as well as finding them food, is protecting them. So in Jesus' day, there are a lot of predators for the sheep. There were wolves, and that's talked about. You hear Jesus talking about the wolves. There were also occasionally bears, lions, hyenas, and jackals. It's not a job for the faint-hearted. And you see in the Bible, David, the psalm writer, he was a shepherd, and he was very good with his slingshot, and you'd want to be, because who wants to face a lion with no weapon? And so here is the role of a shepherd. Then at night you'd bring them back, and you would again have different shepherds staying with them, watching their flocks by night. A little bit familiar from Christmas. This is the job of the shepherd, just to watch the sheep constantly. So here we have this beautiful story. There's sheep and one gets lost. And here there's a picture of God and God's love for every person. That when that one sheep is lost, when that one sheep is strayed, God is going after it. When one human being has lost their way, when one person thinks, I'm too far away to be noticed by God, I'm out here on my own, Jesus reminds us that God's love comes and finds us. God's love comes to rescue us. And if you hear nothing else today, that reminder is something that can carry us through the darkest times. We are not alone. God is out there hunting for us and will find us. Here is this beautiful image. There's a second part of the story that the shepherd brings the sheep home. Shepherd brings the sheep on its shoulders because sheep can't be trusted to walk in the right direction. It's not a dog. So the sheep actually has to carry it and force it to come back to where it needs to go. And I think there's this quite incredible picture here. The shepherd doesn't sit down with the sheep in the thorn bush, lost amongst the rocks. The shepherd picks up the sheep and brings it back to where it belongs. And I think if this is a picture of God's love for us, God's love for humanity, it's worth remembering this, that God doesn't leave us alone, that God's intention is for us to be in community. And I think in our culture, we can forget that pretty easily. People are like, it's just me and God sitting next to the still waters, having a great time. And this is where I'm going to stay. Just alone, me and God. But God's intention is to bring us back home, to bring us back into community. Now, I know that being in community with others is difficult. It is much easier just imagining ourselves in the quiet, still places, just me and God, or me and my mate and God. But this is not where God leaves the sheep. God doesn't come and find the sheep and plonk down wherever you are. God brings you back into community. So this is where I start going left field. So what does that actually mean? How does this actually work? The flock of sheep is often a picture of the gathered people of God, of the church. Jesus appoints his disciple Peter to feed his sheep, to look after them. And so if we're sheep and we're gathered, well, what does that look like? Some of you will have seen a bishop, either in a Catholic church or an Anglican church, and they carry around a crook with them. And it's this constant reminder that this is the job of a church leader, to be that shepherd who looks after the sheep. And that's passed all the way down over 2,000 years from Jesus saying to Peter, look after my sheep. Here's this image, the community of God are like sheep. And what is the role of the crook? This photo is just because I thought it was cool. Here's a traditional farmer in the UK with his crook, and they're to grab the sheep. Because sheep, when they're lost, are stubborn, scatty, confused, and silly. And a shepherd may have such a relationship that they can call a sheep, but most likely not. The sheep is just going to run away. The sheep actually won't come unless they hear its flock. But here we've got the shepherd. So the shepherd has to grab a sheep and then put the sheep over the shoulder. And so this is the picture. This is the picture of the church, what we're called to do as a church. This is a picture of what church leaders are called to do, to look after the sheep, to look out for the ones that are lost, to grab them and pull them back. Now this next picture is just for the fun of it. This is a picture of one of our newest bishops in New Zealand, Anna Fletcher, and next to her is my brother-in-law. And I've put that up because he carved her crook for her crozier. And so there's no reason other than I wanted to show you that picture. So we've got a shepherd, we've got a flock. Is that enough of an image? Well, I actually think there's something really critical in this passage that the people, when Jesus was saying it, would have known and heard and understand that we can miss. And that is that if you leave 99 sheep to wander by themselves in the wilderness, they're going to get lost. More of them are going to get lost, and they're possibly going to be eaten by predators. So what sort of shepherd actually would just wander away? Oh, one's lost. See, off I go. Shepherds generally worked in teams. That's why there are multiple shepherds on the hills on the night that Jesus is born. They're there as a team. It's not a lone sport. And I think this is really important to remember when we think about our church and our community. It's not a lone sport. Shepherds have often been women. It was, anyone could do it. In the Bible, in the Old Testament, there's a woman, Rachel. She's out tending the sheep. Moses' wife, Zipporah, was a shepherd looking after her father's sheep with her sisters. And so children would go out often and look after the sheep with their family, or you'd get hired hands. It was a team sport. And I think this is what I really want to wonder and ponder about with our thinking of, we rescue people, and then what? The church's job is to proclaim the good news of Jesus. You are loved more than you could ever imagine. And then you're called to join in community. But then what happens? This is not a role that was ever supposed to be done alone. It's not a job that it's like, well, there's one person, it's all their job to do that. I'm just going to get on with my own business. This actually reminds me of a situation we read of in the Bible, and this is of Moses, whose wife Zipporah was a shepherd. Now, Moses' job was to bring the Israelites out of Egypt, out of slavery, into the land of freedom, through the Red Sea, and to create a whole new community. Moses had been raised with the pharaohs, and now he had to lead a new group of people. And as they have passed through the Red Sea, they're beginning to establish themselves. Jethro, who his father-in-law, the father of Zipporah, comes to visit him. And Moses tells him all the incredible things that have happened. And Jethro's like, that's incredible. He creates a sacrifice to God, to praise God for all the good. And then he watches Moses. And this is what happens. The next day, Moses took a seat to hear people's disputes against each other. They waited before him from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that Moses was doing for the people, he asked, "What are you really accomplishing here? Why are you trying to do all this alone while everyone stands around you from morning till evening?" Moses replied, "Because the people come to me to get a ruling from God. When a dispute arises, they come to me, and I'm the one who settles the case between the quarrelling parties. I inform the people of God's decree and give them his instructions." "This is not good," Moses' father-in-law exclaimed. "You are going to wear yourself out, and the people too. This job is too heavy a burden for you to handle all by yourself. Now listen to me, and let me give you a word of advice, and may God be with you. You should continue to be the people's representative before God, bringing their disputes to him. Teach them God's decree and give them his instructions. Show them how to conduct their lives. But select from all the people some capable, honest men who fear God and hate bribes. Appoint them as leaders over groups of 1,000, 100, 50 and 10. They should always be available to solve the people's common disputes, but have them bring the major cases to you. Let the leaders decide the smaller matters themselves. They will help you carry the load, making the task easier for you. If you follow this advice, and if God commands you to do so, then you will be able to endure the pressures, and all these people will go home in peace." Moses listened to his father-in-law's advice and followed his suggestions. He chose capable men from all over Israel and appointed them as leaders over the people. He put them in charge of groups of 1,000, 100, 50 and 10. These men were always available to solve the people's common disputes. They brought the major cases to Moses, but they took care of the smaller matters themselves. I think it's interesting. Moses had defaulted to what I think was an Egyptian way of doing things. Egypt, they had the cult of the pharaoh. The pharaoh was like a god. You worship the pharaoh, you worship the ground he walked on, and everything revolved around the pharaoh. And here, Moses has done probably all he knows. He grew up with the pharaohs. This is what he saw. So he's like, right, this is how you run a nation. I just have to sit here and be the wise person. I think of TV shows where if you ever see, the king takes his seat in the throne room and people are brought before him to plead, to ask questions. This is kind of the similar vibe. And then Jethro, who's a shepherd, looks at the situation, and he has not grown up with the pharaohs. And he's like, what a stupid way of running things. This is just ridiculous. So he institutes, a new organisational structure. How should it be run? And he does something that I think you could say is probably quite similar to some of the organisational structures in our culture today. You've got your CEO, probably above them a board, an executive team, employees, customers, and so on. This is the pattern that is happening. And actually, if you think of traditional church structures, or actually even some of the contemporary modern churches, it's very similar to this. You've got your archbishop, your bishop, your archdeacon, and then your priests and so on. Very hierarchical structure. It's just a fun fact here. The word vicar, so you have vicars in an Anglican church, comes from the shortened form of vicarious, because the bishop appoints people to serve vicariously in their place. So that's this very sort of structure here. Here is the church. And down the bottom, probably other people. And traditionally, this is how it worked. And then the priest will tell them what to do and so on. Now, people have realised this is not a good structure, just to have people at the top dictating to people how they need to do things. We need things to be more grassroots. We need things to be, from the ground up. And so now in literature talking about leadership, we often see an inverted pyramid. This is really common. And then Christians will look at this and say this is how God intended it to be, because this is servant leadership. Whoever is going to lead must be the least of all. They are there to serve. There is some problems with that though, because if you look, this is really unstable. At any moment it could topple. The CEO is potentially going to get crushed by the weight of everything that's happening above them. And I think this too has begun to happen in the church. At the moment, there's lots of conversations happening about well-being. Well-being, sort of the buzz phrase. And at our synod, which is the Anglican gathering that happens annually, and each church sends representatives, there was discussion about clergy, that's ministers' well-being. And this follows on from stuff that is happening around the world. Jeff was telling me in Melbourne, they've just voted that clergy no longer have to work 6 days a week. They only now have to work 5 days a week. One of the things that motivated them to say that was they said it's probably illegal to make people do that and not pay them any extra. In the UK, this conversation has been happening for a while, and 8 years ago they had a big discussion, and the Archbishop at the time, Justin Welby, made this observation. Being a parish priest was my most stressful job. Now, Justin Welby, before he became a minister, was in the corporate sector. He was a manager, and he ended up becoming the CEO of an oil company. Just want you to imagine how stressful being a CEO of an oil company might be. And he left that world and went into the church, where he says being a vicar was the most stressful job he'd ever had. And then he became a bishop and an archbishop of Canterbury. He still says being a vicar was the most stressful job I've ever had. And this is what he says about it. The hardest work I've ever done and the most stressful was as a parish priest, mainly because it was isolated, insatiably demanding, and I was on the whole working without close colleagues, and that wears people down. This theme is beginning to merge. How do we manage, how do we care for the church? How do we run after the one who is lost? It has to happen in a team if we're not going to see people completely burn out. Another priest there, the vicar from Battersley, Simon Butler, says, the expectations of parishioners set us on pedestals only to rejoice in knocking us off again, expecting a perfection in us that hides great hypocrisy in others. I think we can all name church leaders that have done terrible things. And I think it is right to hold those people accountable. They must be. In the last couple of years, I've seen 2 parish priests be removed from their roles in the Anglican Church because their behaviour wasn't okay. Nothing horrifically scandalous, just like not okay. But there is this strange tension here. That's one extreme. The other extreme is this, and I think I have felt this too, where people expect that if you're a priest, you will do everything correct all the time. It's like, that is pretty impossible. And again, it puts all this pressure on people. Someone else made this comment. This is the Bishop of Chelmsford. He said his job was often a lonely one. Sometimes it can be a very heavy weight to carry, and sometimes it can feel like you're carrying it on your own. It can sometimes be a lonely role. Again, I think here's the problem, that people have looked to the world. How do we try and manage this situation? How do we try, when we gather, to organise ourselves? And we've slipped into these really unhealthy patterns like Moses did, where suddenly there's one person and the load is too great to bear. And the answer is team. When we gather as a church, when we care for each other as people who are following Jesus, when we look after each other when people are in need, who does that work? I think one of the problems we see in churches, the majority of churches in the Western world have 80 people in them. And I think it's pretty clear why, because one person can care for 80 people. Most churches won't ever grow bigger than that because one person can't care for that many people. The next issue, or the sort of number that you stop at, is around 200 people. And that's where we have been sitting as a church for a number of years. And I find it curious because we have lots of new people that are coming to our church, but the church isn't getting any bigger. And this is, again, the reason why. It's too much for one person. And so our structures are wrong. And if you're like, this is interesting, what is Carolyn going to say next? I don't know. That's all I can name. We've inherited these structures. They put people on pedestals. People get burnt out, behave badly, things end in tatters. I don't think any of these church leaders that you see in the news ever started off going, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to exploit people, I'm going to act inappropriately. I'm sure they all started with good intentions. Some of them I've watched where it's like, it wasn't me doing it, it was because I'm on prescription medication, and then I also was drinking alcohol, and then I'm like, what on earth are you doing in a job where that's what you need to cope? If your only way of coping in a role, what are we setting up? These crazy, monstrous churches with these people having to take drugs, prescription or otherwise, to get themselves through a day. It's nonsense. Can it be like Jethro, Moses' father-in-law? This is nonsense. What are we doing? And I think this is a question that I think we need to sit with. What are we doing? We're called to be in community. We're called to love and care for each other. But how do we do this? I think we can read from this that we need to be in teams. And we need to figure out how we structure ourselves in those. It does mean that some people have to step up and go, you know what, I can care for 10 people. I've got that in me. Someone else might go, I can care for 100. And then there's the inverse of that. When we call our leaders to be accountable, which we should, teachable and correctable, then we've got to look, how do we do that amongst ourselves? How do we do it so that whoever puts their hand up and says, I can lead, is, accountable? They're not behaving badly. So here's the challenge I think we have for the church. Here's the challenge, particularly in the Western church, but probably globally. We are called to be in community. We're not called to sit under the bush, waiting for God to come and find us so we can be alone with Jesus next to the still waters. We're called to be in community, and that's important. But then we're called to somehow structure ourselves. All through the New Testament, Paul writes letters to the early church, and they're trying to figure this out. And if you read books of theology, people are still arguing about the best ways to structure the church. We haven't figured it out yet. How do we do this? But this is the call. It would be easier to just all be by ourselves, but we're called to be in community. How do we organise ourselves when we do? I want to pray and just ask God, what are we meant to do here? I'm not expecting lightning bolts to come down, but if we do, that would be amazing. That'd be great. But let's ask God to continue to guide us and to help the whole church globally. Try and figure out, how do we in this day and age structure ourselves? Let's pray together. God, so often we look to the world around us. We look to models that aren't from you. We look to leadership patterns that don't look like Jesus. We fall into habits that are far from what you call us to. And God, we do this in our own lives, and we do this in our corporate lives as a church. God, this is tricky to try and figure out. And so I pray for your guidance for us as a community. I pray that we would be a place where lost sheep could find home. We would be a place that's not just inward looking because it's too hard to figure out how to look outwards. And it would be a place where we could all learn how to serve and lead in the same way Jesus did. And God, where we've been thinking, I'm just going to leave that to someone else, I just pray if you are calling us into something more, to look out for the 10 or the 50, that you would stir a passion inside of us. And God, where we have thought, I can't do that because I'm not good enough, I can't do that, I don't have the resource, teach us what it means to trust you. And God, give us grace for one another. Give us forgiveness for when things go wrong. Help us to have honest conversations with each other. And may we learn in church how to be the kind of people you designed us to be. May we learn then how to operate and show your love in the world around us. Holy Spirit, come and rest on us, teach us and guide us, we pray. Amen.